One of my favorite sayings is that if you can't explain something simply, then you don't understand it. And studying Bitcoin for the last few years has taught me that 99% of people in the crypto industry really don't understand what makes Bitcoin valuable. Most people can stumble through an explanation of some of Bitcoin's features, talk about how it may become a digital version of gold, but almost nobody I've met can come up with a unified framework for what makes Bitcoin valuable. And for years, I learned about Bitcoin by trying to piece together all these individual quotes and individual ideas from all the people I had met, until I read this book, The Bitcoin Standard. It's the first book I've ever read that can simply explain the properties that make money valuable. And in doing so, it explains the properties that make Bitcoin a valuable form of money. If you've never read it, I've left a link in the description for you. This is the book that I wish I could have read when I first started learning about Bitcoin. It would have cut literally years off of my learning curve. One of my favorite things about the book is that all the properties that make money valuable can be grouped into just a few different concepts. But before we get into what all these properties are, it's important that we first step back and understand exactly what money is. At its core, money is just an IOU from society. It's the world's way of saying thank you for all the value you've created, giving you credit that you can then spend anywhere you want. And throughout recorded history, this credit has taken on a lot of different forms. People have used seashells, metal, salt, cattle, rocks, all sorts of items have been used to keep track of the credits that each person had earned. But some of these forms of money have proven to be really bad ways to keep track of how much each person in a society had earned. And that's why most of the items I named are no longer used as money. So for a type of money to be sound and effective and resilient, there are four main properties it should have. The money should be saleable across time, across scale, across space, and it should be censorship resistant. The word saleable here just means that money can easily be sold for goods without losing its value. Now let's dive into what each one of them means. So we've figured out that money is the world's way of crediting you for the value that you've created for society. So you don't want those credits to deteriorate in value. If your money deteriorates physically, or if it deteriorates through inflation, it becomes really difficult to plan for the future and invest in new ventures. You're forced to spend all your money right away for fear that it loses its value. There was a time when dried fish were actually used as money in Newfoundland, and one good reason why they're not used as money today is simply because dried fish rot, they deteriorate. It's not possible to keep them in the same condition over time. 100 years later, your dried fish are turned to ashes. Another example of this is in Venezuela, where money has been deteriorated through inflation. The government printed so much money that now the cash is worthless. People are literally throwing it out into the streets. People have even started using money to make handbags. The value of the paper bills is now worth more as a tool for arts and crafts than it is as money. When it comes to Bitcoin, the limited supply of 21 million coins means that you can't destroy the value of a Bitcoin by printing more of them. And because the network's entirely digital, that means that the deterioration, the physical deterioration that other types of money might face don't really apply to Bitcoin. This makes Bitcoin saleable across time. The next property of sound money is that it is saleable across scale. And this one's pretty straightforward. It basically just means that a good form of money is one that can be used for large purchases and can easily be split up into smaller chunks to use for small purchases. One reason we don't use cattle as a form of money today is because it's just not feasible to split up a cow into multiple pieces in order to pay for small purchases. You can buy things that are worth exactly one cow with a cow, but you can't buy a cup of coffee, or you can't buy a smaller item that requires you to split up a cow into multiple pieces. On the other hand, you have precious metals like gold that fulfill this property really well. It's easy to split up gold into pieces of any size, and that's the same with Bitcoin. You can split it up into 100 million different pieces, making it very easy to make small purchases or large purchases. And for that reason, Bitcoin is saleable across scale. Next, sound money must be saleable across space. money can be kind of thought of as a network effect, where the more people that use a money, the more valuable it becomes. But for more people to use a certain type of money, it must be able to move across boundaries, both real boundaries and imaginary ones. The island of Yap famously used giant stones as money for centuries, but this was never going to become a suitable form of money anywhere outside of the island, because it was just almost impossible to move these giant stones across the world. Bitcoin, on the other hand, nails this property. In minutes, you can send anyone in the world any denomination of money, no matter where they live. It's a truly global currency with no borders. And this makes Bitcoin saleable across space. Now, the final property of sound money is censorship resistance. The internet is really good at moving information around, and in many cases, you can actually move cash instantly throughout the internet, but it comes with some limitations. If you're using PayPal, if you're using Venmo, if you're using any centralized service, moving money, it becomes really easy to track that and to stop that. Any bank or the government can stop your transfers, shut down your accounts whenever they want. On the other hand, the Bitcoin network is entirely peer-to-peer. Transactions cannot be censored because there's no one entity that controls the network, and therefore Bitcoin is censorship resistant. So when you combine all four of those properties together and you compare Bitcoin to other forms of money that have existed throughout human history, you can start to see why Bitcoin is gaining so much attention in the last few years. Bitcoin is sound money. It is saleable across time, space, scale, and it is censorship resistant. And that's really the high-level overview of what makes Bitcoin valuable. There's a lot of other details that I didn't get into, but it's all in this book. So to learn more, hit the link in the description and pick up a copy of the Bitcoin Standard. If you're interested in learning about Bitcoin, this book will take years off of your learning curve.